Tonight, a major moment in the Middle East, a deal for peace in Gaza. I'm in Doha, where Israel and Hamas have agreed terms to end the war. In Gaza, celebrations as 15 months of conflict near an end. While for Israelis, the long wait is almost over for dozens of hostages and their families to be reunited. The world welcomes a historic moment.
We've not given up. And now, after more than 400 days of struggle, the day of success has arrived.
But was it President-elect Trump who helped push this deal over the line? I asked the man who mediated talks, the Qatari Prime Minister. Was it pressure from the incoming Trump administration that got it over the line?
Seeing a collaboration transcending both administrations was a clear demonstration for the commitment of the U.S. to reach to that deal.
Tonight, questions remain. Who will rebuild and run Gaza? How soon will hostages be freed? We'll explain every detail of the deal on tonight's The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening from the Qatari capital of Doha and the special edition of The World. For months, this has been the epicenter of ceasefire talks aiming to bring peace to Gaza. Tonight, a deal has finally been agreed and is set to come into force on Sunday. After 466 days of war, a reported 47,000 Palestinian deaths, and more than 1,200 Israelis killed. Now there is a chance to end the bloodshed and to reunite families. 94 Israeli hostages remain in Gaza. Their families' hopes and prayers to see their loved ones again could soon be realized. Well, tonight we're seeing scenes of celebration, but undoubtedly there will also be trepidation. Some hostage families still don't know if their loved ones are dead or alive. There's also huge uncertainty for Gazans. The aim of this war was to destroy Hamas, but with that came the flattening of homes, hospitals and businesses. The fabric of daily life has been torn apart by conflict. Gaza is now a hellscape that will take years and billions of pounds to repair. Who rebuilds and who rules Gaza is one of the many outstanding questions. We'll look to answer all of those questions in a moment, and I'll take you through the details of the deal, which will be voted on by the Israeli Knesset tomorrow. But first, our Middle East correspondent Ali Bunkle has tonight's main report.
Finally, after 467 days of war, a ceasefire has been agreed between Israel and Hamas. Within minutes of the news breaking, there were celebrations across Gaza. They were dancing in the streets of Khan Yunis, a city that has been almost totally flattened over the many months of fighting. And Hamas gunmen paraded in balaclavas in a sign that the group is still not defeated.
All citizens feel relieved and happy with the news of the ceasefire, and we hope to return to our homes, villages and cities as soon as possible.
We have been waiting for this happiness for a year and a half. No one can feel the feeling that we are experiencing now, an indescribable feeling.
In Tel Aviv, where weekly demonstrations calling for a deal had brought the streets to a standstill, they lit candles tonight and finally started to hope that their relatives would be coming home soon. And in Doha, where the negotiations have been taking place, the Qatari Prime Minister said that they will work to make sure that the deal sticks.
We are committed. We will continue to do everything we can, everything possible, together with our partners to ensure that this deal is implemented as it's agreed, and this deal will bring us peace, hopefully, at the end of it. I believe that it all depends on the parties of the agreement and acting in good faith in that agreement in order to ensure that no collapse happening to that deal.
And in Washington, it was welcomed by the outgoing US President Joe Biden, whose officials have spent so many hours and days to reach this moment.
There was no other way for this war to end than with a hostage deal. And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war. The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed. And this deal, the people of Gaza can finally recover and rebuild. They can look to a future without Hamas in power.
Kafir Bibas is the youngest Israeli hostage. He will turn 2 on Saturday. He is being held in Gaza with his parents and his 5-year-old brother. Hamas claimed that they were killed in an Israeli airstrike many months ago, but their family wants them home regardless, dead or alive.
It's time to bring home our people. It's time to end this war. It's time to prove that humanity can win, and people who are taken from their homes in their pajamas will be reunited with their loved ones. Don't let us down.
Many in Israel are against the deal because it doesn't guarantee the release of all the hostages in the first phase, and because Hamas is not defeated in Gaza. The deal will need to be ratified by Israel's Security Cabinet on Thursday. It is expected to be approved. Even as the negotiations were continuing in Doha, the fighting carried on in Gaza. This was an airstrike early on Wednesday morning. The ceasefire will come into force this Sunday. The coming days will be a mix of anticipation and tension as both sides try to make final military gains whilst their citizens count down the hours to peace. But after so many months, so many thousands dead, and so many failed attempts to end the war, there is now an end in sight. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
And Ali joins us now live from Jerusalem. Ali, we'll talk about the mood on the ground and in Gaza in just a moment. But just if you could tell us a little bit more about the details of this deal, because it is complex and there are multiple phases.
Yeah, it is complex. So, okay, it's going to work something like this. There are 3 phases to it. The first phase is the only one that has been negotiated in full and agreed upon. It will be 6 weeks in duration, 42 days, and during that period, 33 of the hostages will be released. Women, children, people over the ages of 50, and the unwell. In return, Israel will release as many as 2,000 Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails. There'll be a surge of humanitarian aid, around 600 trucks of aid every single day into Gaza. That is desperately needed. And the Israeli military will withdraw its forces from the urban areas in Gaza, but they will remain in Gaza itself, particularly along a buffer zone up and down the border, and in the south and in other parts of Gaza. There's other aspects to it, like the hours of the day when the Israelis can fly surveillance flights over Gaza, for example. But those are the main pillars of phase 1. Phase 2 will be negotiated from the 16th day onwards. If they get to phase 2, then that will see the release of further groups of hostages, including some of the IDF soldiers. And then phase 3, which will be many months from now, and is still yet to be negotiated, would be the reconstruction of Gaza, the governance of Gaza, the future of Gaza, if you like. It's hugely important for the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza. But whether we'll ever get there, many people are unsure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to get to. We just saw in your piece there the demonstrations in Israel, the celebrations in Gaza. But of course, there is still so much uncertainty. And frankly, between now and Sunday, anything could happen.
Tonight is a night for celebration for the people of Gaza who have been living for 15.5 months of war, of Israeli forces fighting them in the streets in Gaza and flattening much of Gaza. I've seen it with my own eyes. Tonight is a night of celebration for the relatives of the hostages, the 98 in total that are being held in Gaza, and hope that they will be released. Those of them who are alive released into medical care, then back to their families. Those who have died, their bodies released for burial. But already tonight, barely an hour after President Biden had finished speaking in Washington, there was another intense bombardment of Gaza. I would expect in the days before the ceasefire comes into force on Sunday, there'll be more fighting as both sides try and make military gains. As I said in my report, the Israeli government, the Israeli cabinet still needs to ratify this. There's a Supreme Court process, which is an aspect of it as well, to allow Israelis to challenge the deal, particularly challenge the Palestinian prisoners who are going to be freed if they want to. None of that is expected to derail this, but it means that there is, for all of the celebrations taking place tonight, there is still a few days before this comes into force, and those days will pass with quite a degree of nervousness here.
Yeah, absolutely. Ali, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. Well, as we've heard, Qatar has played a crucial role as a mediator in the painstaking ceasefire negotiations. I attended the Qatari Prime Minister's news conference earlier today when Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Thani announced a deal had been done. Just have a listen.
Congratulations. This is a huge moment. You, as you say, have been working on this deal for many months. And the question is, why now? Why this moment? And was it pressure from the incoming Trump administration that got it over the line? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Yalda, for this question. Actually, we've been raising the question of the right moment for the entire period since the collapse of the first phase. But we have seen a momentum that started to build in the last month, and we kept pushing for that, working together very closely with our partners. And I can say that what we have seen from the U.S. in the past few days, seeing a collaboration transcending both administrations, was a clear demonstration for the commitment of the U.S. to reach to that deal. And I really would like to thank both the envoys who are here with us in the last couple of days, and they played a vital role in reaching to this moment. And of course, for us and Egypt, this is something that we are a stakeholder in that conflict, that we have to do it and we have to help and to support. But we have seen the steps that's been taken recently from the U.S. has yielded to this moment.
That was the Qatari Prime Minister speaking a little earlier at that press conference. Well, let's bring in our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone, who's at the White House for us. Mark, I put that question to the Qatari Prime Minister because the real sense here on the ground is that the last month has been really quite crucial because of the pressure that the Trump administration and the envoy of Donald Trump has put on all sides. You really do get that sense because when you look at the deal, it's not very different from the deal that the Biden administration has been pushing from about May of last year.
It's almost identical to the May deal that Biden announced here at the White House all those months ago. So it's one of the key questions. I guess there are three key questions right now. The first is, can the deal, the ceasefire, hold? The second is, will it bring a lasting peace? And the third question is, as you put to the Qatari Prime Minister, why now? I think there are a number of reasons. First of all, the situation on the ground in the region has changed quite significantly significantly just in the last few months, with Iranian proxies across the region being quite severely degraded, whether it be Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Syrian regime has gone completely. That, of course, was aligned to Iran, and the continued degrading of Hamas in Gaza. So all of that is a strategic gain and puts Israel in a better position, making it more likely that they would be happy from their part to do a deal. But the other thing that's changed is Trump. And there's no two ways about that. His unpredictability has focused minds. There's no question about that. It has focused minds in Qatar, in Egypt, in Iran, and also in Israel. Netanyahu realised over the course of the past 18 months that he didn't need to dance to Joe Biden's tune. That much was proved time and again by the fact that Netanyahu was able to walk over Joe Biden's red lines and nothing happened. It's different with Trump. Trump is unpredictable. That claim that all hell would break loose if the hostages were not released very, very quickly after Trump took office. What did that mean? Was it an empty threat? Was it not an empty threat? Who knows? That's Trump. And I think that focused Netanyahu's mind. It focused other minds as well. So both sides are obviously trying to claim all the credit. It's far more nuanced than that. Have a listen to Biden at the end of his statement a little earlier on, where he was asked what the history books would make, who they would give the credit to.
I knew this deal would have to be implemented by the next team, so I told my team to coordinate closely with the incoming team to make sure we're all speaking with the same voice, because that's what American presidents do.
Books credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
That remark there, Mark, is that a joke? And while we were in that press conference with the Qatari Prime Minister, we saw Donald Trump put out a statement on Truth Social, even before the Qataris had fully, said that this deal was over the line.
He was the first to make a statement, even before the outgoing administration of Biden made any sort of noises about whether or not a deal had been struck. Trump was on social media, on Truth Social, with this statement. He said this epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure that the safety of all Americans and our allies. And it continued, we will continue promoting peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of this ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. Now, Yalda, the Abraham Accords was a deal done in the first Trump presidency that saw Israeli normalization with certain Gulf Arab states. It was a remarkable moment in itself, but it has been set back massively by the events of October the 7th and what followed after that. Now, as I said a little earlier on, Netanyahu needs to dance to Trump's tune because he needs Trump. He needs Trump to be able to further the Abraham Accords. What Netanyahu really wants is normalization with Saudi Arabia, harder now than it was 4 years ago because of what has unfolded in Gaza. And to get normalization, he needs a deal, and he needs a deal that Trump can help with. And I think that goes to the heart of answering that question, why now? Why this deal came now? I would also add briefly, Yalda, that you were discussing with Ali whether or not this will hold over the next 4 days, this ceasefire. I wonder whether it will, for precisely that reason. The Israelis are not likely to derail anything now because of one word, Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're expecting that inauguration of Donald Trump next Monday. And as you say, that ceasefire agreement is expected to, kick in on Sunday. Mark, thanks so much for bringing us up to date. And Mark was talking there about normalization that Israel wants with Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi officials have maintained, and they've certainly told me, that they are focused on normalization only if there is a Palestinian state. Well, here in Doha, there's certainly a feeling of accomplishment in the role Qatar has played mediating those on and off negotiations over so many months. Let's bring in our colleague in our international news editor, Zain Jafar, who's here with me in Doha. And Zain, I mean, it's been quite a tense, not just 24 hours, but really the last 48 hours since Monday, when we were told that this deal could potentially come into effect.
Yeah, I mean, a momentous day, as we've been hearing from yourself, from our colleagues around the world, an incredible moment and very hopeful moment, but also a manic day and a manic 48 hours. And how many times have we seen, just in the last few hours alone, this deal was certainly on, and then there was a spanner in the works and it was off. And I think what's interesting here and really key is that those announcements that the deal was finally reached and an agreement had been forced through came here in Doha. It's quite remarkable, actually, that Qatar has played such a central role in bringing the two sides, Israel and Hamas, and of course with the support of the United States and Egypt, bringing the two sides together and getting this deal over the line. An incredibly complicated, incredibly difficult deal. And it hasn't come without criticism and controversy. We've heard over the last 15 months, if not longer, criticism from some quarters in the United States, criticism from some quarters in Israel at the role and relationship between Hamas and Qatar. Hamas has its political office here in Qatar, and Qatar acts as this intermediary between all the different sides in trying to get messages and trying to get this deal done. But they have always been very clear. The Prime Minister of Qatar that we heard you speak to earlier today has been very clear. This is something that has been asked of them from the United States and before October the 7th from Israel, because it's a rare opportunity for the US and Israel to have some kind of dialogue with Hamas, and it has actually delivered, and it's delivered something which we hope will lead to a long-term ceasefire. I think there are a couple of very interesting points here that Mark alluded to earlier as well. First of all, the incoming President-elect Donald Trump's representative, Steve Witkoff, he wasn't in Cairo, he wasn't in Tel Aviv, he was here in Doha. The outgoing US President Joe Biden's representative, Brett McGurk, he's been here in Doha for days trying to get this deal over the line. That shows you just how significant a role Qatar is playing. And when we talk about the complexities and difficulties of this deal, we have to remember 3 phases. The first phase itself is 6 weeks. It's going to be very complex. It's going to be very difficult. And if there isn't a direct line of communication with Qatar, especially seeing as we're in uncharted territory here, we don't know what's left of Hamas's military and political infrastructure in Gaza. So when it comes to trying to iron out issues, problems, last-minute crises when it comes to this ceasefire and hostage and prisoner exchange, the role of Qatar in dealing with Hamas's political office here in Doha is going to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And this talk about the day after and Qatar's role in that, in rebuilding Gaza. Zain, thank you so much for all of your analysis there. Well, of the 251 hostages taken by Hamas on October the 7th, 94 are being held in Gaza. However, it's thought some of those have actually died. Let's just go through some. Just some of the faces there on your screen of those still being held in Gaza. Civilians from just 18-month-old to 86-year-olds. Let's just have a look at some of their stories now. 28-year-old Emily Damari, a dual British-Israeli national, was shot and taken from an Israeli kibbutz across the border into Gaza on October the 7th. Kafir Bibas is the youngest person to be taken hostage, now just 18 months old after more than a year in captivity. He was taken along with his 5-year-old brother Ariel and his parents Yarden and Shiri when Hamas militants stormed their home. The oldest hostage in Gaza is Shlomo Mansour, who's now 86 years old, a grandfather. He survived the Farhud massacre in Iraq in 1941 and later moved to Israel, settling in the Kisufim kibbutz with his family. Teenager Liri Albag is one of the 5 female IDF soldiers who were kidnapped. She's been the most recent Israeli hostage to appear in a Hamas-released video just 10 days ago. And 50-year-old Sachi Aidan was taken hostage when armed members of Hamas attacked his home. His eldest daughter, Mayan, was shot in front of him. And Sachi Aidan's cousin, Adam Ma'anet, joins me now. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us here on this program. I just want to get your sense, your emotions in this very, I guess, optimistic moment after so much darkness.
It certainly is optimistic, Yalda. But it's one that we have to be very cautiously optimistic about. We have been here before. There have been moments in the past year where we felt like a deal was imminent, that our hostages would be returned to us. There are, in fact, 98 hostages there, not just 94. There are 4 hostages who've been there longer, since October 7th. And they, we want all of them to be freed immediately. It's been 467 days of sleepless nights, worrying and feeling guilty even just for having a few hours of sleep because you're worried that you might have missed some urgent news or of our loved ones. And so it's very anxious time at the moment. I think it's important to be sanguine about the prospects of our hostages being returned to us, but I've learned to become guarded and cautiously optimistic because of the past experiences throughout the year, and also because there's still so many unknowns, so many details that we still don't know. My family have not received an official call from the IDF or the Israeli government, so there's still so many things that we don't know. We don't even know if Tzachi is even alive. So it's a very difficult time for us. And also when Tzachi was taken, we don't even know if he's aware that his family are alive, because he saw his firstborn daughter murdered in front of his eyes, dying in his arms. He was frog-marched out of the house where they lived in Nahalos with her blood all over him. And for all we know, he might be thinking that the rest of the family were murdered and he was taken as collateral. So it's a very fraught moment. We're very anxious, but we are hopeful. We are.
Yeah, as you say, an incredibly difficult moment for families like yourselves for the last 15 months, where you've just had, I guess in your case, no real proof of life and no real understanding of, beyond that day, what has happened to someone like Sachi.
Well, yes, and there's also the other issue, which is Hamas is very good at playing these games where they trickle out hope. There'll be a few hostages released each day, and there'll be all these stages and conditions, phases. It feels very unfair, for example, that Tzachi was taken with our neighbor Omri from the same community, and although Tzachi's on the first phase list that's been leaked, if the leak is true, then but Omri isn't, and Omri has 2 small children, ages 1 and 3, 2 girls, beautiful girls who missed their father and have hardly known him in their short lives. And it would feel very unfair if Tzachi came home, but Omri had to languish in Gazan tunnels for weeks, if not months longer. That would be an agonizing feeling for all of us, because all of the hostage families now feel very connected to one another. So we all feel each other's pain and joys. And so I think that's another aspect of this, which I feel is an extra torment. And there's an element of survivor's guilt by proxy if that were to come to pass.
Yeah, Adam, you spoke there, about being guarded, about being sanguine, about being cautious, because the next few days, frankly, the next few weeks and months are going to be quite difficult. But do you feel, that the trauma will stay with your community, with your country, or do you think there will come a point where, if this ceasefire is successful, if all the hostages are out and there is a cessation to the violence and the hostilities, that you will be able to move beyond this?
Yalda, my family experienced all aspects of the atrocities. They had their eldest daughter, Mayan. She had just celebrated her 18th birthday only a few days earlier. The balloons from her party were still up in the house. They saw her murdered in front of their eyes. The children, the terror of the family, live streamed onto the Ghali's Facebook after Tsahi's wife, after the terrorists forced her to unlock her phone. The video clips from that moment shared on the internet, one of the earliest clips seen from the October 7th atrocities, seared into our minds. Their home destroyed, Tsahi taken hostage. We still don't know what his welfare is, whether he's alive or dead, what his state is, his health. The children traumatized. Tsahi has 3 other children, other than Mayan, who witnessed their eldest sister murdered. Ghali, who had to bury her firstborn without Tsahi, without her other half. So for our family, I don't think there's ever really we'll never forget this. This will be with us for the rest of our lives. But I think as is for Israel as well. I mean, this was the largest single massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. One doesn't just get over that. I think what Hamas did and Islamic Jihad did and their Iranian regime backers did was to murder the future of the Middle East, to destroy the hope for peace. Most of the communities around that area that they attacked were filled with peace activists, a whole family wiped out who spent every year running a kite festival for peace along the Gaza border. The entire family murdered. Vivian Silver, a giant in the peace movement in Israel, murdered. I think that Hamas has murdered the chances for peace, and we're going to have to live with that legacy. We're going to have to move on into a different reality. I do hope that if we can secure the freedom of the 98 hostages, that we can get to an inflection point in this perpetual forever war that allows us to pivot, to change course, and perhaps to start building a foundation for a different and a better future for all involved. But I think it'll take a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Adam, as you say, there's no real proof of life of Sachi, but you're hoping he's on the first list of the hostages who may be released by Sunday or over the course of the next 42 days. What would you say to him? What are you hoping to say to him when you see him?
You know, I'm just thinking about it, I'm overcome with emotion. It would be such a bittersweet moment. We had to bury his firstborn without him. His children had birthdays without him. His daughter had her bat mitzvah without him. There's so many moments that were lost to the family that we can't have back. There'll be a moment of grief, of reflection, and then of joy mixed with tears. And of course, because we're so connected to the other families, we'll all be continuing to advocate and campaign for the release of all 98 hostages. And we will be sharing in the joy and pain and suffering that comes with that, because we do know that many of those hostages are dead and that Hamas will be returning their bodies, hopefully, to the families so that they can grieve and bury them. And so it's going to be a very, very difficult few months ahead for all of us.
Well, Adam, we're really grateful that you've joined us on the programme and that you've shared your thoughts. I know it's a difficult night and will be a difficult few days. We're very grateful that you've joined us.
Thank you.
And in a moment, we will be speaking to Palestinian journalist Motaz Azeze. But after such bloodshed, the question of who rebuilds and runs Gaza into the future remains really big questions. Joining me now is former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. You and I have spoken multiple times over the course of the last 12 months or so. I just want to get your feelings on the possibility of this ceasefire. There is optimism this evening, at least in the region, that hopefully this time round this ceasefire can hold.
Well, obviously, Yalda, when you hear that there is an agreement and it's been approved and confirmed by all sides, and that 33 hostages are going to be coming back to their homes, to their families, to Adam's family, as you heard him speaking from the bottom of his heart. I mean, everyone is happy. But then we have to think about the broader picture. There are still 65 hostages which are going to be kept for an indefinite period of time. And no one knows for sure whether there will be a second phase and how it will look like, and whether this agreement will, in the first place, will hold for the period that it was designated. So there are many uncertainties still in this context, and we can't ignore them. We hope, we pray, we yearn, we will do everything that we can in order to impact at least our side, to carry on and to protect this. But we can't, hide our doubts as to how it will develop.
Yeah, like you say, Prime Minister, so many questions at this point, so much anxiety on the eve of this potential ceasefire, coming into force by Sunday, just a day before Donald Trump's inauguration.
There is not really an agreement for a permanent ceasefire. There is an agreement for a temporary ceasefire for, I think, about 42 days, maybe 6 weeks. And the return of only 33 hostages. There are still more hostages, and we don't know how many of them will be alive when this phase will end, and then how it will then develop into a meaningful contact after this phase. We don't know. So there is not an agreement about the end of the war, and therefore we couldn't bring back all the hostages. And I think that we have to stop the war now. This is what all the Israelis want, to stop the war now. There is nothing that we can achieve militarily that we didn't already. And if we wait, we may not have back most of the hostages which are still abducted by the Hamas. Therefore, there is joy, there is a degree of relief felt by most of the Israelis, and yet at the same time there is a very strong feeling of doubt and of fear that it may end with this phase and we will not see the others.
Yes, which I wanted to get to. You've spoken about the need for some kind of permanent peace and a permanent ceasefire to reach some kind of agreement so that there is finally some kind of respite for the Palestinians, for Israelis. You were the Prime Minister that came closest to that idea of a Palestinian statehood. You've written about it in the last few months as well. Are you optimistic that perhaps this could be the moment that, this was a moment of rock bottom for both sides, that perhaps something more positive could emerge from it?
I certainly hope so, but I'm not certain. I'd be far from being certain because I haven't seen yet the leadership from my side, to start with, that is prepared to consider even what will be the next phase on a broader political picture, not just the ceasefire, but what is the political horizon which is proposed, which is discussed, which is contemplated by the leaders of the State of Israel. And I don't see a comparable approach by the Palestinian leadership. The fundamental issue that we have to deal with is this. We have broken the military power of Hamas. Okay, let's assume that in the next few weeks or next couple of months, we will eliminate all of the Hamas fighters. There will not be one Hamas fighter remaining alive in Gaza. And then what? We still have 6 million Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. What are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with ourselves in relation to them? Is this something that we even think about? I took the initiative together with a political partner from the other side, from the Palestinian side, the former foreign minister and the ambassador of the United Nations of the Palestinian Authority, Dr. Nasser al-Kidwa, and together we published a joint proposal signed by us already half a year ago that outlines the parameters for ending of the war in Gaza, returning all the hostages, releasing Palestinian prisoners, building a new administration that will take over the running of the affairs of Gaza instead of Hamas, and building a security power that will prevent Hamas from returning back into any position of power in Gaza. And then starting the negotiation for a comprehensive peace on the basis of the principle of two states between us and the Palestinians. This is a political horizon. This is a direction. This is something that can establish a certain genuine hope for something that will develop. I don't see yet a Palestinian leadership and an Israeli leadership that is prepared to come to this point and to move forward towards this direction. And without it, we are going to have more of the same.
Yeah. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, we're always grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I just want to bring you some breaking news that's just come in the last few minutes. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, says he's now spoken with US President-elect Donald Trump. He says in his statement that the Prime Minister thanked the US President-elect Trump for his help in promoting the release of the hostages and for helping Israel end the suffering of dozens of hostages and their families. The Prime Minister made it clear that he's committed to returning all the hostages by any means necessary, and congratulated the US President-elect for his words that the United States will work with Israel to ensure that Gaza will never be a haven for terrorism. The two have agreed to meet soon in Washington to discuss this and other important issues. Prime Minister Netanyahu then spoke with US President Joe Biden and also thanked him for his help in promoting the hostage deal. So that's the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying he's now spoken with US President-elect Donald Trump as well as US President Joe Biden. Well, the conflict has taken an unimaginable toll on the Palestinian civilians. Let's just have a look at what the last 15 months has been like. According to the Health Ministry in Gaza, more than 46,500 Palestinians have been killed since the conflict began on October the 7th, 2023. Among them, 6-year-old Hind Rajab, who was recorded begging rescuers to save her after an airstrike in Gaza City in January 2024. She was found dead with 5 of her relatives and 2 ambulance workers who went to save her. Sabrine Judah, a premature baby rescued from the womb after her mother was killed in an airstrike in the southern Gazan city of Rafah in April last year. She died in hospital 2 days later. And in October last year, 19-year-old Shaban al-Dalu was burned to death in a tent in an airstrike on the Al-Aqsa hospital in Deir al-Balah. He was being treated for an injury he'd suffered 10 days earlier. Well, let's speak now with photojournalist Motaz Azeze, a Palestinian photojournalist who documented the first months of the conflict. He joins me here live in Doha. Motaz, it's really good to speak with you. I spoke to you as well soon after you were evacuated from Gaza and you were exposed to the horrors of this conflict. I just want to first get your emotions and feelings right now, how you feel knowing that there might be this ceasefire that could hold and bring an end to this conflict.
First, thank you for having me, Yalda. And just before I start to talk to you about this, I want to use this moment to thank the state of Qatar, the Emir of Qatar, the Prime Minister, the Minister Lula for all the efforts and the help for my people. About the emotions, first, thank God I'm alive till that day to talk to you about this. As I saw you talking about the hostages or the prisoners, the Israeli prisoners who are 94 but nobody talked about the 17,000 Palestinians who've been kidnapped by Israeli occupation from Gaza and took to Nakab and other Israeli prisons. Nobody talked about the people who are missed till now, the thousands of people. Nobody talked about why the international law doesn't work for Palestinians. But yeah, it works everywhere, but not for Palestinians. I want to talk about the numbers we just saw on the TV. The 46, it's not accurate. At least now more than 70 or 80,000 people have been killed. And there's a lot, thousands of people are missed. The Palestinian journalists who are missed till now, Nidal Luhaidi, Haytham Abdul Wahid, and more. The Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, who have been kidnapped and nobody knows where is he till now. Israeli occupation took him in a tank and nobody knows where is he. Why nobody at least give her some respect for our blood, the thousands of people, not just dozens of Israeli prisoners, no. The thousands of the lives of Palestinians who are now, nobody knows where are they. At least when the Israeli prisoners go out, and like in the hostages changing between Hamas and Israeli occupation, when the Israeli go out from Gaza, he go out like fat, smiling, and a good health. But when the Palestinians go out from the prison, after being kidnapped, after being being under torturing for like days and days, he's like, some of them went out from the prisons and they died after. Some of them went out and found their families have passed. So why you don't talk about this as like if you talk about the numbers, there are thousands of Palestinians. Nobody knows anything about them.
You just spoke about the death toll of the Palestinians killed in Gaza throughout the course of this conflict. Of course, the Palestinian journalists on the ground have been trying to document this. International journalists have not been given access to Gaza other than embeds with the IDF. When you look at the images of Gaza today, buildings flattened, people left homeless, 100,000 people missing under buildings, under rubble. What kind of Gaza do you think, if you are ever able to go back, do you think that you will return to?
I'm gonna return, yeah, sell my home. And but unfortunately, I'm not going back to Gaza that I raised in, and I know the street, and I know the building, I know everything, every details there. If we are talking about rebuilding Gaza, let's just start building a new Gaza from the beginning. There is no like rebuilding, or because there's nothing left. Maybe I have some hope for Gaza for the future, but at the meantime, we can't be so hopeful because the agreement will start on Sunday. As we start to talk now, there was a new massacre in Gaza City as 18 people have been killed by Israeli occupation and Israeli airstrike. People are excited. They want to go back to their places, but they will not find their houses. They know that they will not find anything. But at least they will get a new tent, maybe, or use the used one and put it above the rubble of their house. So for me, I'm not gonna see Gaza again, the old one that I raised in, but I will see a new Gaza. And I don't know if that will feels good, because the street that I raised in, the street I took picture, and the people I know, I lost hundreds of people, not dozens, not 94. I lost hundreds of people that I know. I don't know how I'm gonna feel, actually.
Mutaz, I was talking to you this evening. We were both at the Qatari Prime Minister's press conference, and I asked you to reflect on your friends and colleagues who are in Gaza. What are they saying? What are they doing? How are they feeling in this moment?
In this moment, every one of them is excited and afraid. Afraid because he may lose his life now by airstrike. At the same time, now he knows a date that he's going back to his house, because my house have 40 people, my friends, my colleagues, and they're all from Gaza City itself and the north of Gaza Strip. Now they know that there's a date we are going back to our homes after they lost family, after they lost everything. But at least they know that they are going to back their place, their land. They're excited. A lot of people start now to grieve and cry on the people that they have lost. Because this time, for us, now we were gonna start to cry about the people we lost, about our lives, about the city, the places we have lost. So this is our time not to cry. This is not a time for celebrate to anyone. It's our time now just to imagine what happened to us, and the world watch a genocide.
Motaz, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. That was Motaz Azeze, photojournalist from Gaza, joining me here in Doha. Now, Masab Abu Toha is a Palestinian poet and writer from Gaza. His latest work, Forest of Noise, is a collection of poems about life in Gaza. He's in New York tonight and joins me live. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I was just speaking there to Motaz Azeze. I just want to get your reflections on what you've heard unfold over the course of the last few hours, that there might be a potential ceasefire that will come into force on Sunday to bring an end to this conflict.
Yeah, thank you, Yalda, for hosting me, and I would like to thank Motaz for raising up the points that he talked about what it means for us to hear that there is a ceasefire. What we are hearing is that a ceasefire has been reached, but a ceasefire is different from peace. It's not going to bring anything back to us. It will not bring back the 60% of the Gaza that has been erased by the Israeli forces. I mean, the 60% that has been burned, that has been demolished, that has been decimated, on top of people who used to live in these places, whether these are warehouses, whether these were hospitals or school shelters. I mean, everyone is excited. I mean, I will not say excited, but everyone is hopeful that this ceasefire deal is going to bring an end to the bloodshed. And if one looks at the terms of the ceasefire, you will see from the points that were raised in this ceasefire deal that Israel has been in control of everything. There is something about the Rafah border crossing. There is something about the number of the aid trucks that are going to enter into Gaza. There is a number of there is something about who could exit and who could return of the wounded people. And these things in themselves tell us who is committing a genocide against an occupied people.
I just want to ask you about this idea of the day after in Gaza, rebuilding Gaza. Are you hopeful that not just this ceasefire will hold, but there will be a lasting solution to the conflict, and that you could, in your lifetime, see Palestinian statehood?
You know, Yalda, I think if we had, I mean, such a president like Donald Trump. I mean, I don't like him, but I mean, if we had someone like him in 1948 who would come up and say, I mean, who I would say, if he was on the side of the Palestinian people, if he came up and say, okay, before I come into office, I would like to see a solution to the Palestinian refugee problem in 1948. Let's say Trump was, living at that time. And he came up and say, okay, before I come into office, I need to see an end to the Palestinian refugee problem. I would like to see people who were expelled from Jaffa, Haifa, from Acre, from Nazareth, return to their homes that they were expelled from in 1948. So a solution cannot be named a solution if it does not bring justice to the people who have been oppressed not only by Israel, but also by the whole world. I mean, we have seen not only Israel killing Palestinians, but we have seen countries justifying this killing machine. And we hear the American administration saying, we are encouraging the Israelis to be more careful when they target. So they are encouraging them. Just imagine an administration that is watching and is involved in the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, telling the whole world that we are encouraging the genociders to kill less people. But when it comes to the Palestinian people, of course, the labels are ready for them.
Well, big questions about who and how Gaza will be rebuilt. Have you been speaking to friends, contacts, family on the ground? How are they feeling? What are they saying? Because we are seeing some images coming out of Gaza of people celebrating.
Yalda, before I answer your question, the ceasefire will come into force on Sunday, and just in the past few hours after the ceasefire deal was announced, at least 22 people were killed in Gaza. In one airstrike in Sheikh neighborhood, 18 people were killed after Israel bombed 4 houses in that neighborhood. And you can imagine that those people who were living in those houses were mostly displaced. Like my family, for example, they had to leave Beit Lahia in northern Gaza, and they are staying with families in Gaza City. So people are not happy because there is a ceasefire, but because they will take some breath, without being so terrified of the Israeli bombardment. I mean, I personally lost about 100 family members from both my side and my wife's side. So people want really to reach a point that they will not be killed, where they could go back, not only to their cities, but even to the rubble of their houses in northern Gaza, everywhere.
Yes. Yes, we've been hearing Motaz speak about that as well. Mossab, we're really grateful that you've joined us here on the program. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you're hearing a range of voices there, from the families of the hostages to Palestinian journalists joining me here on the ground in Doha. We'll be following all of the developments over the course of the next few days. The news at 10 will be back after the break. Do stay with us. We've got lots more coming up.